But after I would call into them and I would be stifled, I would be muted, I would be verbally abused. It's pointless trying to get in through to these people. Go ahead, Caleb.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That was fast. The title of the room, Why Are You an Atheist? Basically, my reason is twofold. The first one is I think that people just made up God as a concept to explain reality. And second, um, one of
Does
the
that
reasons why I think
justify
that's
does that
true.
justify the statement there is no God?
No, but that's one of the reasons
Okay,
why
well
I'm an atheist.
then that doesn't answer the question.
Well, it does.
Atheism,
Why am I an atheist?
the
That answers the
the
question.
standard definition of atheism is that there are no gods. Do you use the standard definition?
Sure. Yeah, I suppose you could put me in the
Okay,
hard atheist
so
camp
okay,
if that's what it is.
so under that definition specifically then you would hold to there is no supreme being creator God. So God does not exist because
Um, the idea of God seems superfluous. I don't see a reason
okay. Okay,
to
when you say
propose
it's
that in the first place.
superfluous, okay, so
Yeah,
when you say God doesn't exist because it seems superfluous, to say that God is superfluous, you're saying God is not necessary, right?
sure. I
Good.
suppose. Yeah, that's
If
fair.
you say God is not necessary, that is the same thing as saying God doesn't exist.
Which is my
So,
position. Yeah.
right, but you see, all it is a recapitulation of the same position without telling me why that's the case.
To say that it's superfluous is to say
If
that
you
it's not
say God
necessary,
is not
right?
necessary, okay, just so we're clear on this, okay, and you seem so far like a straight shooter, and I appreciate that. Um, when you say God is not necessary, you do understand that God is defined as being the necessary precondition. And so if you say God is not necessary, that is equivalent to saying God doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not answering the question why God doesn't exist. So either
Um,
your position will be one of two things. Either what is ultimate, that is not God, is impersonal, or that there is nothing ultimate at all from which all things derive and depend. So, which of those two scenarios do you use in order to invoke that God isn't necessary?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think you might be a bit over
Okay,
my head
well
on this one.
then your assertion that God is superfluous is simply an empty claim. It's simply a recapitulation that God does not exist, but in different words. Okay, when Lawrence Krauss, were you listening when I was jabbering about Lawrence Krauss?
No, actually, I just hopped in, and you said if you're
Okay,
an
okay,
atheist, feel free to
okay.
hop on.
So I was jabbering about Lawrence Krauss. Do you know who Lawrence Krauss is?
I'm familiar with them, yeah.
Okay, he wrote the book A Universe from Nothing. He's a foaming at the mouth, rabid atheist. Okay, that's my take on it. He was uh, rambling about we don't need God. God is not necessary. We can explain everything through the laws of nature. Okay, those were almost verbatim what he said. When it was my turn to speak with him in the AMA, I asked him this question. When I asked him, how is it that God doesn't exist? He denied denying that God exists and then tried to convey that we just have insufficient information. I then said to him, Dr. Krauss, if my memory serves me correctly, because there's a number of PhD atheists that I talk to, so hopefully I don't conflate my interactions. I said, Dr. Krauss, what is it that is ultimate and fundamental that institutes and secures every instance of what is, can be, and cannot be? And his response was, I don't know. Why does it even matter? Well, if what is ultimate or fundamental, which dictates every instance of what is, can be, and cannot be, is unknown and unidentifiable, then how could he possibly rationally say God isn't needed? He couldn't.
Right.
And at
Well,
that
I
point,
think
when I
that
asked the question, let me just finish. At that point,
sure.
when I asked the question, he got pissed. He was angry. He got agitated, and the host quickly got rid of me from the conversation, lest Krauss be further embarrassed. Okay?
Right. Well, I think that, I mean, if you say that God is like the fundamental thing responsible for all things, including space, time, and matter, and all that. And so, if that's what you want to call God, I do think that there is something that
Okay. Well, here's
space, time, and matter is dependent on that isn't space, time, and matter.
okay, but here's the
But I
problem.
don't think that that's a person.
Okay.
But if you want to call that God, I'm fine
Well,
with
but you
that, I
see,
suppose.
God by definition is defined as being an agent, persona. If it is
And the
without the
ergo, we have
attribute,
the superfluous part. I don't think that it's necessary for that thing to be a
well,
person,
here,
even though that
okay, well,
thing might
here's the problem.
exist.
Okay, so when you say God isn't necessary, you're just saying God doesn't exist. Okay,
I'm saying, no, no, no. I said I agree that this thing might exist, but I don't think that this thing is a person.
okay, and what is your rational grounds to invoke that which is ultimate as impersonal?
My view of reality uh, is that I believe in the B theory, and that all things just are, and always have been, always will be. And so whatever that emergent thing is,
Okay, do
doesn't
you
need
believe?
to do
Okay,
anything beyond
in
exist.
the B theory of time, is there a plurality of things, or is reality one single concrete thing, or is reality composed of an abstract set of concrete particulars?
Abstract set of concrete.
Yeah,
Does that mean like a
if
number
I
of
say
things? Is that a way of saying it? There's a particular number
well
of things? Is that what that
a
means? Because I
set
think there's a finite amount of stuff.
okay, when we say you just think that there's reality there without God. So do you believe that there's a plurality of discrete things out there? That there are two or more things?
Oh, if that's this, yeah, clearly, yeah.
Okay, well here's the problem, okay? And the way to understand this problem is you always want to juxtapose your conceptualizing of this model of reality in contrast to the Christian worldview. In the Christian worldview, we have God who is ultimate and absolute, and a mind who institutes all of the particularity that we call creation. And he just doesn't institute all of these particulars, whatever they may be at their lowest level. He also imposes various levels of unity and categories. Okay, so we have unity and diversity. And because we have unity and diversity, we now can have a coherent and intelligible world that we speak of. Okay? Now, since you don't believe God is the institutor and imposer of the unity and diversity, but you do believe that the unity and diversity is real. So I want to know is what makes the unity among the diversity of things real? Because
Excuse me.
if you're holding to the realness of the unity among the diversity of things in violation of your criterion of belief, then you cannot invoke it. So is the unity, the categoryness among the diversity of things in the world real without God?
I suppose it depends.
Okay,
That's more of a
good, good.
philosophical question. I'm not really sure to answer that. I mean, because
Well,
if all
what
things
you
are
believe,
fundamentally the
but
same thing,
you
maybe
believe
I couldn't
you
make that
believe
statement, right?
you no you believe that naturalism or materialism, if I'm not misrepresenting to you, is a intelligible alternative to the God world, right?
Sure, yeah.
Good. So I'm challenging that view that naturalism is coherent at all. So in your naturalistic or materialistic framework, your model of reality, where you have an array of particulars, right, whatever they may be, that there are categories of things of unity and diversity. There's regularity amongst irregularity. There's continuity along with discontinuity. Okay. Now, are those things real?
Sure,
Because
yeah.
okay, and if the continuity and the unity among diversity were not real, you and I would not be able to actually speak intelligibly about anything in our world. But you believe that the unity and continuity among the diversity of things is real without God. So what makes that unity real?
I don't know how to answer that, to be honest. It sounds
So
like
right.
it would.
Okay.
Let me see if I understand though,
Sure.
because I might not simply understand what you're asking. It sounds like what you're asking me is, okay, how is it that you can explain that there is more than one type of thing? Is that what you're asking me? Under a naturalistic worldview?
If I say to you, there are two dogs in my front yard, okay? The word dogs, the number two, and the word yard all are expressions of categories of things and unity among diversity, right? There's
Okay.
dogness, there's two-ness, right? And there's yardness, okay? Now, you believe that in your world that you're not God world. We could call it naturalism or materialism, physicalism, whatever. You believe that this is more parsimonious, that it's appealing, right? You feel, well, I don't see a reason to believe in God, and I just have the natural world. Okay, so you are believing in the natural world without God.
Yes.
I want to see if that's coherent. Okay.
Okay.
Now, in the Christian worldview, which is the only worldview that I and other Christian defenders support, okay, God is
Sure.
the necessary precondition for everything, including truth, reason, intelligibility, unity among diversity, continuity, discontinuity, however you want to describe these. God is
So
the
you're saying
one.
is that so
Yeah.
you're saying that that includes just the ability in principle to categorize things?
Yeah, God,
Okay.
the purpose, and the plan of God is what we could call the concrete universal from which all things derive and depend. Now, when you reject that scenario, that model of reality, for whatever reason, you are going to be adopting an alternative worldview, usually expressed, but not always, as naturalism or materialism. And you think that it is at least intelligible to a
Well,
certain
I have a
degree.
question about the intelligible, what you just said, though. You said that God is responsible for the ability for such a thing as categorization to exist. So, is that to say that if God were to, in theory, make more than one type of thing, but didn't invent the ability to categorize things, that there wouldn't actually be more than one type of thing?
Repeat the question.
Okay, so if God is responsible for the, in principle, the ability to categorize things, is it possible then for God to make more than one kind of thing, but not create the ability to categorize said things?
That's a good question. Um, Let me think about that. That's a very good question. Um, well, let's say God were to create two discrete things. Okay, so there's
Hmm.
God and these two things. They would still be They would still be categorized because they would be creaturely. So I don't believe. And Matt Yester, if you want to jump on this or join in,
Sure.
please feel free. I don't believe that it would be possible for God to create any plurality of things without Him them being of some category. Okay,
We still have a
Okay, I
because
creator
agree.
creature distinction, creator
what's that?
creation.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
got
there
two
would.
categories of created or creator and creature, or creator and creation distinction
Right.
right there.
Yeah. So by virtue of God creating, He is imposing categoriness.
Yeah, but you're
Even if
saying
you,
that that's an option, that
okay,
of
all right.
God.
Let me illustrate this way. And by the way, listen to me. You and I aren't agreeing on certain things, but I want to tell
Hmm.
you, I always stop when I'm dealing with somebody like you who is displaying a very mature and intelligent approach, but where we're not agreeing and compliment. So I appreciate your
Oh,
disposition and
thank
the
you.
way you're conducting yourself. We don't see this usually. We usually see unbelievers and atheists who display, 15-year-olds with ADD who didn't take the Ritalin. But you are conduct. See, I always like to stop and compliment people. I'm not brown nosing here, right? I wish we had more people like you. Okay,
I
so
appreciate that. It's very nice.
so getting back to, so let's say God creates a Jablublu and a Kerflunkel. Okay, a Jablublu and a Kerflunkel. Okay,
Mhm.
in spite of me telling you anything about them, they would still be within a category because there would now be the creator and the creation categories. So they couldn't escape categorization.
Yeah, and see, I think that that's the thing that I agree with you on, that I hope that we can kind of find the common ground with, because I think that that is just by virtue of reality that God can't impose on, even. Like that's just a
Oh, okay,
fact of reality.
well, no. See, now the mistake you're making here is we're no longer talking about God now. Okay,
I agree, sure.
because reality is, how should I put this to you? The term reality is an abstraction attempting to place within a mental set certain concrete particulars. Now, God, by definition, if he's God, the supreme being, the creator, is not and could not be subject to any external or independent parameter. Okay?
Are we making the exception of the creator creation distinction, though?
Yeah, if
Or
then
are you
you're then
saying
you're
that even
yeah,
God
if
could
you
void that
if
distinction
you
even?
if you communicate in whatever words you choose that God is subject to one or more parameters, then we're no longer talking about the creator creature distinction. You're now talking about God as no longer being ultimate, meaning that
Yes.
all things derive and depend upon him. Now we have a
Which I think
God
is the goal,
who may,
though,
so
because what
no,
we're
but you see,
talking about.
but hold on a second, hold on a second. Now you're
Mhm.
talking about a God that coexists with something else. And then he decides to make the world, but he doesn't control everything. He doesn't create everything.
Okay.
And
Well, if
he himself is subject to at least one thing. But not, then we're no longer talking about God in terms of the creator creature distinction.
Yeah,
If
we're dualist
someone's
in one sense, but not in that sense. There's no
yeah,
co-ultimacy. We're just talking about a dualistic metaphysic of creator and
yeah,
creation, eternal and finite.
yeah. He might be God in the sense of a Greek philosophy where he's the prime mover, but he's not God in terms of the creator creature
Right.
distinction. Now, the point is here, okay? You believe that there's no God, that God's not necessary. So what is the rationale that God does not exist? Okay? Now, just simply telling me, well, there's the natural world. Well, where'd you come up with that universal, and how is it even intelligible?
well,
What actually makes any unity among diversity real? So you have a multiple problems here
sure, yeah,
instantiating
that's it's a
that
complex question for
the
sure. So,
universal, that all of these particulars exist with independence from God. You're going to have to defend that universal, and then you're going to have to explain how all the particulars within the set and as a set are intelligible.
sure.
What unified anything?
Again, I think that there is an ultimate, as you call it. The distinction between our worldviews, at the end of the day, is that this thing is a person that chooses certain things that manifest in reality, whereas I think that
Wait a
this
minute.
thing,
You
yes,
believe that there's an ultimate, but it's not a mind. It's not an
yes.
agent. Okay. Now,
Mhm.
how are you able to instantiate that that is?
I'm sorry,
Other than the
can you say that
fact,
again?
other than the fact that you verbalize it, how do you instantiate that there is something that's ultimate from which all things that are not itself derive and depend upon, and that it's impersonal? How do you account that it actually is? How do you account for that?
Well, um, it's a complex question. That's a good question as well.
It's actually a simple question.
How so? What do you mean by what? Maybe.
If you said to me, how do you account for what is ultimate and is a persona and agent that we call God? I say, well, it's very simple. He constructed the world in such a way as to reveal himself that he is, as opposed to he created the world and he didn't reveal himself.
Well, that's fine, but if I were to say the same thing, that this thing
Really?
created the world in such a way that we are capable of
And
making distinctions, you're
where'd
going
you
to
get
ask
that
me,
from? Where'd
how
you
is
get
that
that from?
possible?
Where?
Right.
No. I'm not going to ask you how it's possible. I'm going to say, where'd you get that from?
Do you mean as an idea?
So you're telling me that there is an ultimacy from which all things derive and depend. It's impersonal. It's not an agent.
Mhm.
And so, how do you know it's there?
It's this idea of emergent space-time that seems to be rather
No. How do
popular.
you know that it's there?
Oh, I don't, like, no, if you're asking me if I'm certain that such a thing. I think that it's more likely than not. Absolutely. I
No,
think
no,
it's
no, no,
absurd to
no,
think.
no, no, no. That's a category error that you just committed. Okay,
What do you mean?
because what is ultimate itself is not subject to probabilistic or contingent situations. You're committing
Well,
a
I'm not
category
saying
error.
that my opinion of it is dictating whether or not it
You
exists
are
or not.
asserting
It's there or it's
God does
not.
not.
That's fair.
God does not exist because what is ultimate is not a mind. So I'm asking you to instantiate that. Okay. How did
Yeah.
you arrive? By what means were you able to determine that there is indeed something ultimate and that it's impersonal? How did you arrive at that?
Well, at the end of the day, just to cut to the chase, I think that um, essentially there's some nuance here, but I'm cutting to the chase. Pretty much any possible possibility exists. It just does. So if
You're not
if if
addressing
that's
the
the case,
question.
I hold on. Just let me if you don't mind, I can tell you how this ties in here. And so if it is the case that all things that could be are, then we don't need a mind to make that happen. What we need is an on-off switch because those things either are or aren't. Or it could be the
Can you
case
tell
that
me?
something pick
Can
and
you tell
choose
me?
from that, but I don't believe that there's just a limited
You're
number. I
still
think that
you're just monologuing at this point. You're not answering my
sure,
question. How
okay,
did you
maybe
arrive that there is an ultimate and that it's impersonal? How did
again,
you come to that? By
yeah,
what means did you come to that conclusion?
I my conclusion is that all possible possibility exists.
No, sir. No. That's. Listen.
That's not my conclusion. What do you mean, no,
What
sir?
is what is possible? What is, can be, and cannot be will be dictated
Yeah, and
by
see, I don't necessarily claim to know everything that's possible. And again, I think there's a
Sir.
finite amount of stuff.
Listen,
So there's a limiting
listen.
force.
Look. You're a
It's just
nice
a
guy.
complex
Listen to.
question, and I'm
Can
trying
you
to cut
answer
to
the
the chase.
question? Let me ask you
Yeah.
a question. Do you know what your mother's middle name is?
Actually, hold on. Maybe I don't. I don't think I do, actually. I don't.
Do you know what your brother or sister's middle name is, if you have one?
Yes, I know my brother and my sisters.
How did you come to know what their middle name actually is?
I share one with my brother, so that one's very easy to remember.
Was it
And
communicated to you?
I, and I've seen it as well. I've seen his
Okay,
birth
good.
certificate, his driver's
How did you
license, things
come
like
to
that.
know that there is something ultimate from which all things universally derive and depend and that it's impersonal? How did you
Okay.
come to know
I
that
see what
that's
you're
the
saying here.
case?
So I became convinced through the by just as an outside layman observer, mind you, not as somebody like who's in the field, but by professionals in the field of physics, uh, that yes, it seems to be the case that all possible possibilities exist. That's what it convinced me of.
You know
That
what you're
world
reminding you
is
know what you're
well.
reminding me of?
Can I just finish the sentence and then I promise I'll be done.
Do you know
That
what you're
world
doing?
where all possible possibility exists is fine and a mind could exist there, but it's superfluous, and that was why I think it's
Do you
not
know what you're
necessary. It's
doing?
superfluous,
Do you know what you're doing right
and I'm
now?
done.
Do you know
I
what
was
you
trying to
just
get to the end of
did?
the sentence. Yeah,
Do you know what you just did? Okay.
I was trying
You
to
were
get to the end of
asked
the sentence. Yeah.
you were asked a straightforward question multiple times. The answer you gave is indistinguishable from the answers that these young female beauty pageants give when they ask a question that they don't know the answer. They fake it.
Well,
You
you're
weren't
asking me
answering.
why I believe what I believe. I don't know how else to answer than to
You
explain
never
why I
once.
believe it.
You just rambled. You weren't. You were pretending to answer. How did you come to know by what means that
Hmm.
there is indeed a ultimate, that everything universally derives and depends upon it, and by what means did you come to know that it is and that it's impersonal? By what means?
It was a grueling process of, again, as an outside observer,
It was a
just
dark and
doing my
stormy
best
night.
to
It was a dark and
understand.
stormy night. It was a grueling process.
Mhm. Okay,
The
I
wind
was
was
just trying to
blowing
make the
on
conversation a little
the wind
interesting,
was
add a little
blowing on
bit,
the
little bit of
shutters.
flair.
It was a dark and stormy night.
Okay, but see, I'm trying. I don't understand because you're asking me to tell you how it is that I came to believe this, right? Is that your question?
Do you believe that men landed on the moon?
Yes.
How did you come to arrive at that belief?
Okay, yeah, okay, yes, sure. I became convinced of that through a very similar process, whereby, as an outside observer, layman who's not an expert in the field,
Mhm.
decided to judge the body of work available to me and decide for myself. And I think that,
Good.
yes, we
Okay.
went to the moon.
How did you come to know that it is the case that there is something that is ultimate, from which all things universally derive and depend, and that it's impersonal? By what means were you able to discover that?
Okay. Um, just a minor distinction. I don't claim to know it. I claim to believe it. So in other
Okay.
words, I think that it is the case,
Okay.
but I
A
don't claim to
distinction
know that.
without a difference. Knowledge is a subset of belief. By what by what
And there's a
means were you
difference with
able
the
to come to
distinction.
believe? How did you come to believe that that's the case?
I don't know how to explain it any further. I,
Is that
as an
belief
outside
without
observer, I
is it
observed the body of work available to me and made a conclusion
are
and
you
came
a,
to a
are you a,
conclusion.
are you a lawyer for corporations?
No, I'm just a lowly piano
You you
technician,
you
man.
you 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 missed your calling. Okay? You would make a great corporate leader. They need people like you to answer questions in Congress, pretending to
I don't
answer
know
while
how
you
more
weren't
clearly to
answering.
answer your question of how it
Sir,
is that I came to
what
believe
is
what
the
I believe.
rational basis behind your belief that there is something ultimate, universally, that everything derives from, and that it's impersonal? What is the rational justification for that belief?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna repeat myself so many times. I'm
So
just gonna
you so
I'm
you
going.
don't
I
so
have
you
to be done here because
no
I'm
you
not gonna
don't have
do
one
that.
because you didn't give me an answer what the rational basis is. Were you able to come to a rational belief that there's something ultimate by virtue of your sense perception?
Well, I had no choice but to use my sense of perception. So
How did
yeah,
your
I would say
sense
yeah.
perception how did your sense perception verify that there is indeed something ultimate?
That's an odd question. I don't.
No, it's a
How is that
legitimate
not an
question.
obvious? I don't
See, now what
understand.
you're doing, you are doing what I say people do, okay? That the unbelievers that I deal with are dishonest to one degree or another. And when
I
the
don't. You're
questions,
asking me how is it that I?
may I finish, please? When
Yeah,
the
sure.
questions reach a certain point, the unbeliever, such as yourself, tries to engage in obfuscation, rabbit trailing, and monologuing and dodging the question. And that is precisely what you're doing right now. I said to you, how did you rationally come to believe that there is indeed something that is ultimate, that all things universally derive and depend upon? What's the rational basis for that? And you respond by saying, well, that's an odd question.
Well, I mean,
That's a dodge. Is there a rational basis behind your belief that there is indeed something ultimate that all things universally derive and depend upon? Do you have a rational basis for that?
uh, again, the only reason that I think that it's more likely than not is because I think that the concept of emergent space-time is more likely than not.
Sir,
So I believe it on
you're
those
doing
grounds.
it
And one of the,
again.
if you want me to explain that
You're
further, it
monologuing
has
now.
quite a bit to
Listen,
do with black holes. Yeah.
you're not okay. Okay, so now you're purposely being deceitful because
How
you
so?
know how so? Because I'm an intelligent adult. You know, and you know that I know that you're purposely obfuscating. You're not addressing the issue. The
Well,
issue is
honestly,
not
I was
black.
just trying
Listen
to
to me.
avoid a
Listen,
conversation
listen,
about black
listen
holes
to
and
me.
information theory to
Listen to
talk
me.
about whether or not God
Listen to
exists.
me. Black holes or cotton candy at the local 4-H fair, okay, is not the issue. The issue is I want to know, how did you rationally come to the conclusion that there is an ultimate that all things universally derive from, and that it's not God? Because you said God's not necessary. So how did you rationally justify, how did you come to rationally believe that there is an ultimate and that it's impersonal?
All right. I came to believe that there was an ultimate, again, because I think that there is something ultimately responsible for all space, time, and matter. I agree on that point.
What's the
Um,
rationale behind that?
Probably for the same similar reasons that you have, that space, time, and matter probably more likely
No,
came from
sir. No,
something
sir. My position is that I
more
believe
fundamental
that
than.
what it, no, sir. My
Sorry, go ahead.
position that there is an ultimacy that is an agent and a mind, that it is taking the initiative, the God of the Bible, to construct the world in such a way that all the facts are revelatory of and indicative of him by his purpose. So you didn't arrive at the same way, okay? Because
I said similar,
my
but
my
yeah.
my invoking the universal concrete of the supreme being, the creator, the God of the Bible, is by virtue of him taking the initiative by choice to disclose his existence. But that is not the same way that you have arrived allegedly rationally at your belief that there is something that's ultimate and it's impersonal.
Yeah.
So
The
impersonal.
impersonal. Yeah.
Mhm.
I, the impersonal part, admittedly, and I'm going to go ahead and give this to you. This is a big bone to throw out there. Is an assumption by virtue of the fact that I believe that a universe wherein all possible possibility exists and a mind exists that is responsible for it, and one where a mind isn't responsible for it. We just need an on-off switch. The mind being responsible for that, it seems superfluous to me. Like
Okay.
if a
It
non-mind can
doesn't
do the
matter to
exact same
me.
thing.
It doesn't matter that something seems to be a certain way. Did it not seem for several thousand years that the sun orbited the earth? Telling me something seems that way does not answer the question. What
Well,
I
you're
want to
asking me
know,
why I
what I
believe,
want
so
to know, how
whether or not
first of
it
all,
seems that way to you is
when
sort of
you say
irrelevant, right?
when you say that all things universally do not derive from an ultimate mind, and it seems that way, is another dodge. It doesn't answer the question. How does it
No, it's
seem
an
that
honest
way?
answer to the question.
Good.
That's what I
Okay.
believe
Okay.
because
Okay.
that's
It
my
seems that way.
bias.
Good. So how does it seem that there's an ultimate and that it's impersonal? How? How does it seem that way?
Okay. Um, the um, okay. To put it very, very simply, the idea that there's a thing that is responsible for creating every possible possibility seems very likely to me. I agree. But the idea that given that all possible possibility either exists or it doesn't under my particular uh, paradigms and my train of thought that gets me to this point, it seems more likely that
You're
this
making
just happened by virtue of
you're
the
ma-
fact that it exists. There's no
you're making
mind
a
needed.
you're making a category error, and you're simply repeating the same thing. You're just saying it's not needed. But how did
Yeah.
you come to the conclusion that it's not needed? Well, you told me it's because it's not needed because there is an ultimate that is impersonal, from which all things universally derive and depend. How did you rationally come to believe that? You have yet to answer that.
Excuse me. I think that I've answered it to the best of my ability, and if that doesn't satisfy you, I'm sorry,
No, you
but I
haven't.
think
No,
that
you
we've
haven't.
reached an
You
impasse at this
have
point. I
you
think.
have you have attempted to filibuster your way out of answering the question, which you have
I'm
not
sorry you feel
answered.
that way. I was just trying to have a conversation with you. I think
No,
you
I don't
expect to
think you're being.
change
Listen
me
to
in
me.
this conversation.
Listen. No. I'm not trying to change you. What I am attempting to show you that your not God world rationale is incoherent on your own terms. Because unless I do that first, unless I destroy your speculations and your belief system that you lift above the knowledge of God as the creator, unless I do that first, I cannot therefore present to you Jesus Christ as your only hope, not only as your Savior to escape the wrath that is to come, but he's your only hope for human reason, truth, and intelligibility. So I have to first bring you to a crisis point that your system on your own terms, by your own criterion and standards, is hopelessly absurd and incoherent. You have not answered the
What
question.
do you what do you mean by
How did
incoherent? You
you?
keep
How
saying it's
your
incoherent.
your position, your
Hmm.
model of reality? Listen to me carefully. Your model of reality has no identifiable, defensible, concrete universal. By concrete universal, I mean an ultimacy of reality from which all things universally derive and depend. You haven't answered the question how
I
that
think I have, and
exists.
I want to. And
How
you're
does it?
saying that it's
How did you
incoherent, right?
arrive? Well, first of all, it's incoherent in the sense that your view of naturalism has
And I want to, I want
nothing
to,
that.
I
May
want
I
to unload
finish,
that word.
please?
Can you? Well, I.
May I
It's no
finish,
point if we
please?
don't know what we're talking
So
about.
you're
What do
just
you
going
mean
to
by
keep on over
incoherent?
talking me? Is that it? I'm trying to explain it to you. It's incoherent on several levels. One, it's not coherent because you haven't instantiated its actuality. Okay. And your failure to instantiate the rationale for that belief that it is the case that there is an impersonal ultimacy, right? And therefore, since you haven't instantiated, when you talk about the world, there's nothing that connects anything together categorically or provides unity or continuity that's real because there's nothing identifiably and defensible that imposes that. So I'll ask you once again, how did you rationally come to believe that it is the case that there is an ultimacy that is the concrete universal, but that it's impersonal? How did you rationally come to believe that
Yeah.
that is
Speaking
necessarily the case?
speaking of
Not that it
monologues, I asked you what you meant by incoherent, and I still have no idea what you mean, man.
Okay, sir,
Can you
how did you
put that in
rationally
a bit
come
more
to
of a bumper sticker
believe?
format?
You see, folks in the audience, this is the little game that they play. It's called verbal dodgeball. Okay, I'll ask the
Speaking of
question again.
monologue,
How did you see? Now you're being deceitful. How
no,
did
I'm
you
pointing out.
rationally
You're
come to
saying I
believe?
monologue. You're
Okay, let me
literally
ask you this
talking to the
question:
audience.
Is this concrete universal? Is this ultimacy? Does it, and being impersonal, does it necessarily exist?
I think it must. Yeah.
Okay. Now, how did you come to the conclusion that it necessarily exists?
Um, that's a paradigm. I'll throw that out there. I think that there's just something responsible, given yes. At the end of the day, I have to say
I'm still waiting.
this is bedrock.
Okay.
That's a
So
paradigm. Yeah.
how did you exclude that you're in a chance world where there isn't indeed an ultimacy that's impersonal? How did you rule out that this is a chance world?
I didn't.
Oh, okay. So then your ultimacy then is just simply utter conjecture, and it's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, I'm saying that there is an ultimacy. Even in that
Is
chance
this
world,
ultimacy
there's an
no,
ultimacy.
is this impersonal ultimacy, is it necessarily the case?
Yes. Even in that
Okay,
chance world.
good. Good. Then how did you come to arrive at that, and that we're not in a world where there is no ultimacy, that we're just in a chance world of spontaneous occurrences?
Yeah, I think it's an unavoidable logical conclusion. I think that there
That's
must
a
be
that's a
something there.
that's a non-informative response and a dodge. How did
Oh,
you logically and rationally conclude that the impersonal ultimacy necessarily exists? How did you come to that conclusion?
I don't know how to answer that any further. I'm sorry.
So you don't
I don't know
have
what
a
else you want from me.
so you don't have a rational accounting that the impersonal ultimacy necessarily exists and necessarily excludes
Well,
God's
I just said
personal
it
ultimacy.
must by virtue of there being something. I mean, there's something
No,
necessarily responsible.
how
That's
do
kind
you
of the thing that I'm
know?
getting at.
How do you, okay, how do you know, or why do you rationally believe that necessarily there is an ultimacy? How?
I don't. Again, there would need to be. That's what makes it a necessity. It's a sort of
Sir,
tautological.
sir, 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 does this thing necessarily exist? As
Yeah.
opposed to there is nothing that is ultimately necessary, that we live in a chance world where nothing is singularly ultimate. How did you determine one scenario over the other?
I told you a while ago that I didn't. I don't exclude the
Stop
possibility
right
that,
there. Repeat right there. So you haven't determined that one scenario is true rather than the other. Is that correct?
insofar as this being a chance reality, not insofar as there's
Okay.
not something
So
ultimately
so
responsible for
so
these realities.
so so you don't have a rational justification that we are in a not chance world. You would prefer to exist within a non chance world.
That's not what I
Okay.
said. I said that I allow the
Okay.
possibility, but I
Sir,
don't believe
sir,
that's the case.
listen to me. Do you have a rational basis to affirm that we are not in a chance world where there is nothing singularly ultimate? Do you have a rational basis that that's not the case?
Actually, I don't know if I could convince somebody of that on because that's
Do
perfectly
you have a
reasonable.
rational basis that that there is not the case that there is not an ultimacy? Do you have a rational basis for that?
That there's not an ultimacy. I don't have a rational basis for that.
Okay. So that when you choose that there is an ultimacy over is not an ultimacy, then you're being arbitrary, aren't you?
By the way, and I'm not trying to dodge you, brother. I promise. I got like 5 minutes, and then I'm gonna have to bust
That's
out of here. I've had a great time, by the
that
way.
that's
But
fine. And listen,
um,
I'm a little bit irritated at your dodging, but
I'm
setting
not.
that
And
aside,
I'm sorry. I don't mean to sound like
that's
a.
okay. Listen, listen,
I
listen,
really do got to
listen to
go.
me. You okay? In spite of my criticism of you, your performance is vastly better than the usual troglodyte atheists and unbelievers that we deal with.
What's
Okay,
troglodyte? What is that? I don't know that one.
it's a kind of a troglodyte is a kind of like a subhuman creature who drags their knuckles. Did you ever see the movie The Time Machine?
Oh, I think I have an idea. Okay.
You remember those subhuman creatures? They were troglodytes. Okay, okay,
Well, technically, those were post-human creatures. Those are more
yeah.
evolved than we are, technically.
Troglodytes are very closely genetically related to Nancy Pelosi.
But anyway, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
don't want to get. You got me for 5 more minutes. I'm sorry if I detracted too far.
Okay,
Can you remember
so
where you left
so
off?
so when you are selecting that we live in a world where there is something singularly ultimate versus there are not, is that an arbitrary decision?
Well, I've already explained that I don't think there is a possibility of a
Is
world
it
existing where there isn't something singularly
arbitrary?
ultimate.
I asked you the question, is your selection of one scenario over the other, is it arbitrary?
No, I wouldn't say so.
Good.
Because
Then
I think that my position is more likely given the
why is
multi.
a
I'm sorry.
singular ultimate the case rather than not the case?
Uh, a singular as opposed to multiple, or a singular as opposed to
You
nothing at
couldn't have
all.
a you couldn't have a multiple ultimate. It would have to by definition be singular. I'm just adding
Yeah, I agree.
singular
Well, there you go. There's your
for
answer.
emphasis. No, 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 no. I'm adding it for emphasis, even though it's redundant. Okay, all right.
Sure.
Now, why is
It's
there?
singular by definition, and it must be there.
I could say why is there an ultimacy? I'm just adding singular there for emphasis. Okay.
I think that's fair, though. I mean, because again, I think that
Why have
there
you
is a thing.
selected that there is an ultimacy rather than we live in a world of a plurality of events where there is not an ultimacy? Why did you select one scenario over the other? Is it arbitrary or not arbitrary?
I don't believe that that is arbitrary.
Good.
As you
What
had
is the
mentioned, the
reason why
idea
you
that there's
selected what is the reason why you selected one worldview over the other? What's the reason?
I think that the alternatives to a singular explanation for everything, like a single fundamental thing, um, and I'll explain further, but more likely than multiple, for as reasons that I'm sure you'll agree with, and far more likely than none, because clearly something
See, you're
exists.
making a category error again. Okay, we're talking about a comprehensive and complete model of reality. Okay, so therefore, the sum total of the worldview itself is not subject to contingency, although things within the system could be contingent. Okay, so
That's fair.
either one or the other is the case. Either we are in a world where there is something ultimate, or we're in a world of a plurality of things and a plurality of events where there is not something that is ultimate. Okay.
I agree.
Now you said the
Mhm.
selection of one over the other is not arbitrary. So what is your reason to select one over the other? You cannot invoke a probabilistic assessment because it's a category error.
Right. I think that the only explanation for a universe such that you explain is one where there is more than one quote fundamental. And as you had mentioned at that point, we not only do we have
Then
a
that's a
logical
deny. Then that's a
inconsistency,
denial.
but we
That's
also
it. You're
have.
not answering the question.
I'm trying.
Okay.
Maybe you're talking over my head. Maybe you're talking down to somebody you shouldn't be talking down
You
to
are
because I
saying
don't.
that we live in a world where there is something ultimate versus a world where there is not an ultimate, where it would just be a chance world, where there wasn't anything singularly dictating every instance of what is, can be, and cannot be. You have chosen one world versus another. The world itself, as a comprehensive package,
Oh, I think I've
is itself
misunderstood.
the
Okay.
world itself as a composite itself is not a contingent thing. Okay, there can be contingencies within the world, but the world itself as a composite is
Right.
not contingent.
Well,
Now
the reason, yeah, that's okay.
you have decided that the complete model of reality itself, okay, you can't say that a model of reality is one of possibility versus the other one, because now the world itself is not the worldview. It no longer is a worldview. Okay, it's simply a
Well, you're
contingency
getting right
within
to the
world.
point now.
Good. So how did you select one comprehensive composite worldview versus the other? How did you
All right.
decide one is
Sure.
real and the other is not?
Sure. So, um, this honestly, what the word you're describing essentially is things not being contingent on other things. Sort of throws like thermodynamics out the window, for example. We
How
have
did you
really damn good
decide
reason to
that the
think.
world of
I'm the
ultimacy
reason why
versus
I
the
think
world
we
of
don't live in
chance?
that particular
All right,
universe. I'm
good,
answering. Why don't I think that's
goodbye.
the
All right, we had enough. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, today we're giving out the Darth Dawkins Award for the greatest dodger and babbler and filibuster of the day, and that goes to that gentleman. So we're done. A pathological dodger. Okay. But I must say, he certainly has the gift of gab. He would make for a great congressman or a great corporate lawyer. Imagine if he's married. When he got married, if the priest or the minister or the rabbi or the justice of peace said, "Do you, sir, take this lovely woman here? Do you take her to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Now, given what we heard here tonight, do you think he's capable of giving a straight answer? Wow. Now, if anyone would like to come up and comment on what you heard, you're free to come up to agree or disagree. Absolutely amazing. Welcome, Derek. What would you like to say?
You're right, Darth. It's just it's these they just dodge, evade, and then you try. I like how you always precise how is it, specific, concise, but then they'll just be like,
See,
oh,
even those of them who are even on their best behavior engage in obfuscation, verbal misdirection, prevarication. Look, it was painfully obvious that he was. It was painfully obvious that he was just filibustering. It was painfully obvious.
yeah, and he switched to probabilistic, Darth. He went from there's no, like, he went from, oh, God does not
No, no,
exist
no,
to,
no. You're not understanding. A a a composite worldview is itself not a contingency. Okay, things within that worldview could be categorized as contingent or probabilistic.
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, because you talk about in creation. That's the thing.
Because you see, here's the thing: is if it's probable, okay, then that destroys the concept of ultimacy.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, that's why you.
he doesn't understand that saying that the ultimate worldview, the impersonal ultimacy versus the non-ultimacy chance world, that the impersonal ultimacy is more probably true. Well, he then destroys its nature of ultimacy because then it is the ground of everything. Therefore, itself, it's not the ultimacy itself. No, it no longer is absolute, but whatever it is sit there. It's subject to probabilistic conditions. Therefore, it's not ultimate.
Yeah, like you try to make, like, they try to make God like part of the creation where God is now contingent.
Well,
It's no longer.
yeah. So, like when people say, "Well, God probably exists," or somebody says God probably doesn't exist, Van Til makes a very astute point that saying any God that you would invoke that you say he probably exists, he's no longer God because you have now annihilated either intentionally or unintentionally that God is ultimate.
Yep, and it would destroy the
Okay,
creator creature
right?
distinct.
Because what is ultimate is what dictates what is, can be, or cannot be.
Yep.
So because this guy has the gift of the gab, which he certainly did,
Yeah.
he just decided, you know what? I'm just going to filibuster my way out of it. And then when I get called out on the carpet for filibustering and not answering the question, what are you talking about? I'm not filibustering. You know, it's like some pedophile who's caught with his hand down the pants of a child. What are you talking about, officer? I'm not doing
Yeah,
anything wrong, officer.
yeah, he didn't answer your question straightforward. He just repeat the question after you. It's like a monologue. I'm not saying there isn't. It's like that's what you just basically just resort to. Yeah.
No, but you see, he wants to sit there and say necessarily God doesn't exist. God's not necessary. He doesn't exist. Why? Well, because you see, there's this other ultimacy, and its existence is probable. It's probable, but then it's not fundamentally necessary. I mean,
Yeah.
you know how I always say, even the best behaved unbelievers, when they're presented with the creator creature distinction, okay, i.e., the Christian worldview, but we'll call it the creator creature distinction, even those individuals who are on their better behavior, okay, they're going to resort to some level of deceptive responses because if they don't, then they're going to be brought to the position where their declaration or invocation of the not God world is indefensible, unsustainable, unsupportable, and without rational defense.
Yeah. You want to hear
That's,
one, Dot?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because I remember from your Discord, like when you were on, I think his name is Friction Philosophy or something, like modality, you know. Oh,
Yeah, that rings a vague. I vaguely remember that. Yeah. What about him?
Yeah, it's like the reason why there isn't God because there's someone that it's like because there's like a God like the cognition, what's it called, cognition cognition reasoning that what can or cannot be, like it's like there's something else that's
Yeah.
like God, that's why there is no God. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But
By the way, I want to give a shout out to Lee for her avatar picture of Terry Garr. Terry Garr was a wonderful actress. She's still alive, but she's in a wheelchair now. But great selection. And if you guys don't know who Terry Garr was, she was a wonderful movie and television actress. I shouldn't say was,
uh,
like she's dead. She's still alive. That's a picture of her from her role in Young Frankenstein, which she was unbelievably funny in that movie. But good avatar pick.
and it never fails though. It's like when they challenge, they're like, oh, I don't know, it's
They just resort to filibustering, and then when you call them out on their filibustering, they go, "I'm not filibustering." Yes, you are.